So now it is my great honor to get to share a few words of Torah. And I want to talk to you tonight about machloket, about disagreement. In part, I want to talk about this because this Tuesday, another kind of PSA warning, right? We got to change our clocks this weekend. And this coming Tuesday is our great country's election. And I think we're all a little bit on edge. We all seem to have moved from a place of generalized anxiety to a place of specific political anxiety, regardless of what side of the aisle you might be on. We keep hearing that this world, that this country is so divided that there must be change, must be some sort of rupture, a tearing of our nation's very soul. This is really stressful. This is really scary. It's deeply concerning. And as ever, when I am in such a bind, when I don't have precedent upon which to understand the moment I and all of us, our whole nation is going through, I, no surprise, turn to our holy texts. And they too are filled with disagreements. Some of the most famous disagreements are those of Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai and their schools of students. It is well known that they fought over everything. Yet our tradition is also filled with comments on their civility towards one another. We are told that though they argued constantly, that they would always share both their teachings and the teachings of the other when they were asked a question, and that the house of Hillel would even go further and they would teach the words of Shammai before they taught their own ideas, before they shared their own words. We're taught that even though they disagreed on absolutely everything, including the rules of kashrut, how it is that we're supposed to eat, and the rules of marriage, they still found ways to eat together, and they still found ways to allow their children to marry each other. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel here follow a basic rule of rabbinic disagreements. Assume the other side is also trying to follow Torah, that they're also trying to uphold the good, and that the disagreement really doesn't lie with the other, but rather in the context. To this end, our rabbis teach us that it's not that Hillel or Shammai is right or wrong, but rather that Hillel's reasoning is right in this world, and Shammai's reasoning for the world to come, the world of Messiah. This is a classic move that the rabbis often use to help resolve disputes, that instead of right and wrong, we say, this one is right in this context, and this one is right in this other context. We could ask, why does our tradition settle disagreements in this way? Because we truly believe that everyone thinks that what they are doing is right, and with so many students behind these rabbis supporting them, it's clear that there must be some truth, some good that drives these people to uphold Torah in this specific way. So, we don't say the other side is wrong. We just clarify what specific context each side is right in. While this, as we said before, allows Hillel and Shammai to live together in relative peace, eating together and allowing their children to marry each other, it didn't always work. I want to tell you a quick story from Masechet Shabbat, where they had a particularly hard stretch in the relationship between these two schools of thought. We are told that there was a time when Hillel and Shammai had been arguing over the same things for 3 years. They had been stuck on a number of questions and just had not been able to get together to offer a ruling to the Jewish people for 3 years. Sound familiar? One day, the students had shown up at the house of study, were counted, and it was found that the students of Beit Shammai outnumbered those of Beit Hillel. On that day, Beit Shammai forced through 18 rulings, which the court had been stuck on for those 3 years. On one ruling in particular, having to do with grape juice and the runoff, it's not important the details, but Hillel pushed back on Shammai. And that's where this story goes a little bit off the rails. Shammai gets riled up, can't believe his reasoning is being questioned here in this moment of his political advantage with more students in the room to vote his ideas through, and he threatens Hillel and his students with their lives. Shammai takes a sword, he throws it into the wall, and the chamber doors are locked. No one is allowed in or out. And then, depending on how you read our text, whether you take them figuratively or literally, a fist fight breaks out. Blood is spilled. all over grape juice. What does our tradition say about this place, about this moment where tempers flared, where passions were hot, and where disagreement boiled over into a fight for one's very life? Our tradition teaches us that a place of such disagreement cannot remain a house of study, nor a house of prayer. We are taught that such a place, this house that Hillel and Shammai and their students had gathered in, this place in which they had fought so bitterly, that very building in due time would crumble. It would fall and become a place of idol worship. A place of such disagreement is one in which God, the capital G good, the divine, cannot live, cannot abide. As a warning, one of our rabbis tells us the story of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi, who were engaged on such a heated debate over a particular rule of Shabbat that they tore a Torah scroll in half. I'm going to sit here for a moment because I really want you to imagine it, that these rabbis, they were so angry, so destructively invested in their own side, so blind to the other, that they both held on to their side of the Torah, pulling it more and more to their side of the room, and eventually it became too much. There's only so much Torah. It can only stretch so far, and the Torah itself tore in half. Sound familiar? Of course, our rabbis are quick to say that they didn't really tear the Torah in half, God forbid, but rather they just pulled so far to the extremes that they in essence created two separate Torah scrolls, two ideas that could not live in harmony together. I don't know if it's fair to say that the moment we are currently in is one of such extremes. But to be honest, these stories of Rabbi Hillel and Shammai, this story of Rabbi Yossi and Elazar pulling the Torah apart, it doesn't feel so far off from our current moment. What is important for us to learn, though, from this bit of extremist rabbinic history is this. Where there's such a level of disagreement, God cannot dwell, and the house will crumble and fall. That to find ourselves at such extremes is to pull at two ends of the Torah until it tears. And once it does, once it has been torn in half, no one is left with a complete scroll. Only fragments. Fragments that can only be understood with the other half that sits in the other's hands. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, let us remember Hillel and Shammai, these two who came to such a disagreement that blood was shed. They had their disagreements, their terrible and tragic moments, yet they still managed to eat together. They still found ways for the next generation, for their children, to marry each other. In other words, they still understood that they were part of the same family. Come what may on Tuesday, let us never forget we are part of this big American family. Shabbat Shalom.